But before we dive into the disturbing tales of the night, let me ask you, do you have the courage to stay until the end? Most viewers don't subscribe to the channel, perhaps out of oversight, or perhaps because after hearing these stories, they never slept the same way again. If you think you can handle it, click subscribe now.
This happened in 2016. I was interning in Montgomery, Alabama, and every day I took the night train line to get back home. It was always a tiring commute, nothing out of the ordinary, until that night. I'll tell you right away, if you ever take the train near midnight on the Alabama line, pay attention. These trains don't always take you where you think you're going. It was a random Tuesday, suffocating heat even at night. That heavy air that only those who have spent a summer in Alabama understand. I arrived at the station around 11:40 p.m. Strangely, the train was already stopped there, with its doors open, without anyone rushing to board. The first sign that something was wrong was the train itself. It wasn't a model I recognized. It seemed too new, shiny, but at the same time, old-fashioned, as if it had been recently restored from a forgotten era. I thought it was strange, but I figured they might have changed the fleet. I entered without thinking much, but as soon as the train left, I began to notice small things. The light inside the car had a kind of yellowish tone, weak, different from the usual. And the strangest thing, no one was talking. No one on their cell phones, no one rummaging in their pockets, just sitting, looking straight ahead. Not a whisper. What bothered me the most was when I realized that the walls of the train weren't exactly glass, but something similar. Mirrored, but with a delayed reflection, as if there was lag, you know. Every time the train made a turn, the reflections of people took an extra second to catch up. I thought it was just tiredness, but then I saw something that made me freeze. There was a man standing, leaning against the door of the car. In the reflection, he was there. But when I looked directly, there was no one, just empty space. But in the mirror, he continued, standing, facing me. I tried to hide it, looking away. That's when I noticed something else. The digital clock in the car read 11:42 p.m. I checked on my wrist, same time, but time didn't seem to pass. The train continued in silence, and little by little, what I saw through the window stopped being familiar. No city, lights, or roads. Just twisted trees, distorted shadows, a darkness that was too thick. Suddenly the train stopped, but not at a station I knew. It was a small platform with cracked concrete, no name, no sign, just an old bench in the middle, and the man in the reflection. Now he was sitting there. He was looking straight at me, as if he was waiting. The doors opened without warning. No one moved. No one got off. Just me, staring at that guy outside. And before I could decide whether to stay or leave, he spoke, in a hoarse voice, but very similar to mine. I thought you weren't going to get off. My heart almost jumped out of my mouth. Where are we? I managed to ask. He tilted his head, as if he found my question funny. Have you ever heard of the Beyond Line? I had never heard of it. But before I could ask more, he said, you shouldn't have gotten on this train. Now you'll have to find your own way back. The doors closed behind me with a click so loud that I jumped. When I looked back at the bench, he wasn't there anymore. Neither was the train. Nothing. Just silence. I stood there for a good few minutes. The heat had disappeared. The air was cold, dense. At the back of the platform, a narrow path led to a dirt road covered in fog. I tried to walk along the train line, but it seemed to get lost in the dark. With no option, I went along the road. After a while walking, I heard a faint sound, like radio static. I followed the sound until I saw an iron guardhouse with a weak lamp flashing. On the door, a rusty sign. Danger. Restricted access. Beyond line. My stomach sank. I looked through the side of the cabin and saw another train stop there. Different, old, but with its doors open. I didn't think twice. I entered and sat in the back. The train began to move on its own. The landscape outside changed slowly. First forest, then fields, roads, lights in the distance, until I recognized the normal city station. The digital clock on the platform read 11:42 p.m. I got off running. When I looked back, there was no train anymore. I never took the train at that time again. To this day, I avoid that station, and if you take the last train late at night, be careful. There are lines that go far beyond the map. I received some messages asking more about this beyond line. I can't explain it properly. But since that day, sometimes when I drive by there, I feel like something is watching me, as if at any moment the doors could open again. Has anyone else experienced something similar?
This happened to me a few years ago when I still lived in Nebraska, in a small town right in the middle of nowhere. It was a normal day, late afternoon. I was coming back from a friend's house and decided to cut through a field that was between our houses. I had passed through there several times before during the day, but that hour, with the sun almost gone, the place seemed different. The sky was strange, a mixture of grey and burnt yellow, leaving everything with that face of an old faded photo. There was no wind, there was no noise, just that heavy silence, as if the whole world was holding its breath. I could swear that the field was smaller, but with each step I took, it seemed that the fence on the other side got farther away. That's when I noticed something that made me stop. The scarecrow. There's always been a scarecrow in that field, but it was simple, old, with torn clothes. But that day, it was different. The eyes were two black buttons that were too big, sewn crookedly, and the mouth, a stitched smile, going from one side of the face to the other. I thought it was strange, but I continued walking. The grass seemed a little taller. Some flowers had a strange purplish hue. I started to feel like I was being watched. That's when I saw something even more bizarre. An old gate at the back of the field ajar. I knew that field had no exit on that side. Never had, but there it was, with the boards broken and leaning to the side, as if someone had just passed through. And then, from the corner of my eye, I saw a cabin. A small cabin that was definitely never there before. Made of dark wood, without windows, just a slightly open door, swaying slowly. It was as if someone lived there, but there was no sign of life to be seen. I felt that coldness running up my spine. Everything inside me screamed for me to keep walking, pretend I didn't see it. But, for some reason that I can't explain, I went to the cabin. I pushed the door slowly and the smell of mold and damp earth hit me. Inside, the floor was packed dirt and the walls full of scarecrows. Smaller scarecrows, hung as if they were paintings, each one with those same stitched smiles and black button eyes. But there was one more thing, on the chest of each one, words sewn by hand, disjointed phrases. I approached one, and what was written made me freeze. "You have been here before." Another one said, "Go back while there is time." But it was a larger scarecrow, leaning in the corner, that really terrified me. It was different. The buttons were burned, the seams tighter. On his chest, the words seemed sewn fresh, as if someone had just finished. "You brought him with you." I walked away quickly, my heart pounding. I went to the door to leave, but it was closed. I tried to turn the knob, nothing, locked. When I turned around, I saw something that wasn't there before. In the center of the room, a rocking chair. It rocked slowly, creaking, as if someone had just gotten out of it. That's when I felt that horrible feeling, as if something was behind me. I didn't dare to look, but in the corner of my eye, I saw a tall, thin shadow. 2 dark spots on the face, like buttons, and a stitched smile that seemed to extend more with each second. I closed my eyes. I told myself it was just imagination. When I opened them, I was no longer in the cabin. I was back in the field. Only it wasn't the same field. The gate was now fully open and, on the other side, instead of the road I knew, there was a city I had never seen before. Old houses, empty streets, and people walking slowly. The problem is that they all had the same stitched smile on their faces. They didn't blink. They didn't speak. They just walked slowly, as if following a rhythm that wasn't from this world. I wanted to run, but the fence behind me seemed farther away, and every time I tried to look back, it was as if the field stretched. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a creak behind me. I turned around. There was the scarecrow, standing in front of the gate, exactly like the one in the cabin. Black buttons, too wide smile, head slightly tilted. I can't explain how, but I started running. I don't know how long I was running. I just remember that, after a while, the field seemed normal again. The road appeared. The gate disappeared. I never went through that field again. Never again. Ever since that day, from time to time, I see scarecrows where there shouldn't be any. Sometimes on vacant lots. Sometimes on the roads. Always with that stitched smile and black buttons. I read about the 7 beyond a while later. I don't know if that's what I saw, but if you ever pass through a field and feel that it seems bigger than it should, or see a gate where there wasn't one, don't cross it. There are places that are easy to enter. Difficult is to leave. I always thought it was an exaggeration when I saw reports about distorted places, parallel realities, those things. Until that night in 2021, when I realized that some doors should remain closed. I work as a night janitor at a small public school in rural Texas, near Amarillo. Nothing glamorous. Turning off the lights, checking locks, making sure no one was left behind. It's always been a quiet job, or it used to be. That night, everything started normally. It was around 10:45 p.m., and I was already finishing my last round. The hallways were silent, as always. That silence that only those who have been alone in a big building know. I was almost ready to leave when I passed by the cafeteria door and saw something strange. The light inside was still on. Now, for context, the cafeteria closes at 6 p.m. at the latest. Always, the cooks leave early. It didn't make sense to have the light on at that hour. My first impulse was to simply turn off the master switch outside and go my way. But I don't know why I stopped. There was something wrong. That kind of feeling that tightens in your stomach, that you can't explain, but you know you shouldn't ignore. I got closer and looked through the window in the door. I saw rows of empty tables, the counter in the back, and a woman standing behind the counter. Short, white hair tied in a bun, very clean apron, but strange. It wasn't the school cook's uniform. I thought maybe someone was trapped inside, but before I could knock on the glass, I noticed something else. There were children there. A line of children, lined up to the counter, all standing, motionless, looking straight ahead. But the school had been empty since 7. There were no children monoxide children there. And, looking closer, I didn't recognize any of them. I've worked there for years. I know who the students are. Those faces were not familiar. Still, something held me there, making me stare. That's when the light inside the cafeteria flickered for a second. Just a second. But, in that instant, I noticed something that made me freeze. The children seemed different, too pale, static, like poorly made dolls. And there was something else I hadn't noticed. The glass doors didn't reflect anything. I could see the interior perfectly, but I didn't see my own reflection. My heart began to beat hard. Everything in me said to get out of there. But before I could walk away, it happened. The children turned at the same time. All faces turned towards me. The cafeteria door slid open, slowly, without anyone touching it. That yellow light leaked through the hallway, and the silence seemed heavier than ever. One of the children, a little girl with braids, opened her mouth. Her voice didn't match her age. "Are you going to stay for dinner?" My stomach churned. I tried to back away, but my feet seemed stuck. Another child, at the back of the line, spoke. But her voice was low, almost like a distant echo. "You shouldn't be here." The woman behind the counter smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. It was too wide, as if her face was cracking. She slowly stood up, her eyes deep set, and said, "It's okay, you've already crossed the door. Here, they call it beyond the picture." My whole body froze. I didn't know what that meant, but everything in me screamed to get out of there. I tried to take a step back. That's when, looking down the hallway, I realized something terrifying. The same children were there too, in the hallway, standing, smiling, as if they surrounded me. I turned back to the cafeteria. The woman was no longer behind the counter. I heard footsteps behind me. I looked at the main door of the school, but the corridors seemed different, longer, darker, as if the school had changed, as if I was walking in circles. Suddenly, I saw an old door, different from the others. The paint peeling, the doorknob rusty. I don't remember ever seeing that door before, but something told me to go through it. When I pushed it, a cold wind hit my face, and, out of nowhere, I was outside the school, the empty parking lot, the building. Normal, I looked back. The cafeteria lights were off. Since that night, I do my rounds quickly. I never stopped in front of the cafeteria again. But, from time to time, when I pass by the hallway too late, I feel that something is watching me from inside that door. I tried to ask other employees. No one knows any lady with a white bun. No one saw children out of hours. But one of the old employees, when I asked, just said, "Don't stop in front of the cafeteria, don't. Not everything that's in there is ours. If anyone here has seen something similar, some corridor or room that seems different, tell me." Since that night, I sometimes feel that, if I had taken one more step, I would never have left. There are places that change when you're not paying attention, and, sometimes, they don't let you go back. This happened in 2018, when I lived in New Orleans, Louisiana. At that time, I worked in an office in the French Quarter, and, on a normal weekday, I went to a bank near Canal Street at lunchtime. I just needed to update some documents. Quick thing, I thought. But I never went back to that place after what I saw inside. It was a hot, stuffy day, typical of summer in NOLA. I entered the bank, relieved by the air conditioning, took my number, and leaned against the wall, like everyone else. Until then, everything normal. People on their cell phones, the electronic sign calling the numbers, until it wasn't normal anymore. First, I noticed that the electronic panel was stopped. It was showing number 37, and my number was 52. I thought it was just a mistake, until I looked at my cell phone. The clock read 1:42 p.m. I kept waiting, distracted, but after a while, I looked again. The panel was still at 37. I looked at my cell phone. 1:42 p.m. I thought it was my imagination, but then came the strange part. No one seemed impatient, not muttering, not puffing. Anyone who has faced a bank line knows there's always someone grumbling. But there, it was absolute silence. I started to observe more. People seemed to still. They looked straight ahead, hands motionless in their laps or holding papers, as if they had forgotten where they were. And that's when I noticed the security guard. He was next to the door, as always, but he wasn't blinking. He was looking directly at me. Fixedly, I looked away, trying to ignore it. But every time I looked again, he was in the same position, staring at me, as if he was waiting for me to notice something. I tried to strike up a conversation with a lady in front of me. I asked if she knew how long she had been there. She turned slowly and gave me a smile. But it wasn't a common smile. It was quick, mechanical, like a badly placed mask. She didn't answer. She just turned back to the front. That's when I noticed that the entire bank seemed quieter than it should be. No sounds of paperwork, no typing, no phone ringing. The kind of silence that begins to tighten in your chest. I looked at the panel again, still 37. My cell phone, still 1:42 p.m. That's when I decided to go to the security guard. Something in the back of my head said that he knew what was happening. I got close and asked, kind of laughing nervously, "Sir, this line has been stopped for a long time. Is everything all right?" He stared at me without changing his expression. He was silent for a few too long seconds, and then spoke low, almost whispering, "If I were you, I wouldn't wait any longer. No, this isn't our bank anymore. Not at this hour." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He looked away for a second, stared at the glass door out front. When he looked back at me, he said, "After 2, sometimes it's another door that opens. They call it beyond the quarter." And before I could ask more, he turned and went to a side door. He disappeared, literally, as if he had vanished into thin air. I went back to the line, but now already trembling inside. I looked around, and that's when I realized the people had changed. They weren't standing anymore. Some were sitting on the floor, others lying strangely, with their heads leaning against the wall, all motionless, all looking at me. The panel continued at 37, but now the letters began to flash something in the middle of the numbers. For a second, I clearly read, "You shouldn't be here." My body froze. I ran towards the main door, but each step seemed heavier. The floor seemed to stretch. The bank lobby, which was once small, now seemed like a long, narrow corridor. When I got close to the door, I looked through the glass. Outside, it was no longer Canal Street. It was a white, empty, endless corridor where the street should be. I pushed the door. It didn't open. I tried again. Nothing. That's when I felt, behind me, as if the people in line were all getting up together, without sound, without warning, just getting up. And, for a second, the electronic sign flashed again. Go back while you can. My body reacted before my mind. I ran back to where I was, went back to the same point where I took my number. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, repeating to myself, "This isn't my place. This isn't my place." When I opened my eyes, the lobby seemed normal. People were standing, talking, using their cell phones. The panel read 49. My cell phone, 1:57 p.m. The security guard, no sign of him. Since that day, I've never entered that bank again. I've never stayed in line for too long. But from time to time, I walk by there. And every time, I always see a security guard standing inside. never the same face, but always staring at me. I researched later and found some stories about places that change when you pay too much attention. Has anyone here experienced something similar? Being trapped in a space that seems normal, but isn't? Because I'm sure that day, if I had passed through the wrong door, I wouldn't have returned.